"My dad does it to me like this every night," she whispered. The cowboy leaned closer and gave her the best any man could ever give. "My dad does it to me like this every night," the giant mail-order bride whispered through trembling lips, her massive frame shaking as she demonstrated the gentle motion, and the cowboy leaned closer, his weathered face soft with understanding, ready to give her the best any man could ever give. Temperance Adelaide Marlowe stood 6'3" in her wedding dress, towering over every soul in Tanner's Crossing, Montana territory. A woman so physically imposing that men had spent 8 years seeing her only as labor to exploit or flesh to bargain for. But tonight, on this fourth evening as Mrs. K. Dalton, she wasn't demonstrating violence or cruelty when she said, "My dad does it to me like this every night." She was remembering love. Her massive hands moved through the air in a gesture so achingly tender it made Cade's throat tighten. She was showing him how her father used to brush her hair, how he used to hold her hand during thunderstorms, how he sang Red River Valley until she felt safe enough to sleep. "Every night my dad did this to me," she repeated, tears streaming down her face as she touched her own forehead where her father used to kiss her goodnight. "He made me feel precious, like I mattered just because I existed." Her voice cracked like splitting wood. "But he died when I was 16. Pneumonia took him 6 months after my mother passed. And for 8 years, no man has touched me with kindness. No man has given me anything without demanding my body in return." Cade Dalton sat perfectly still in the firelight, this weathered cowboy who barely reached her shoulder. His creekstone eyes never left her face. "Every gift came with a price," Temperance continued, her words spilling out like poison she'd held too long. "The hotel manager said I could keep my job if I was friendly to certain guests. The saloon owner offered extra wages if I'd be kind to his special customers. A banker said he'd help with money if I'd visit his home at night." She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold the broken pieces together. "A merchant offered me food if I'd let him touch me. For 8 years, every man who smiled at me wanted something. Every helping hand had fingers that grabbed. Every promise had a hook hidden inside it." Cade's hands clenched into fists on his knees, but he said nothing. Just listened, the way her father used to listen. "So when you picked those wildflowers on the road," Temperance whispered, "and just gave them to me no price, no expectation, I didn't know what to do. When you offered to brush my hair, and then actually stopped at just brushing my hair, I waited all night for you to demand payment." She looked at him now, really looked at him. "But you didn't. You sang to me instead. You sang Red River Valley just like my dad used to sing it. Slow and gentle, like a lullaby instead of a ballad." Cade's eyes glistened in the firelight. "My dad used to do this to me every night," Temperance said again, her voice barely above a whisper now. "He'd brush my hair and sing to me and kiss my forehead and tell me I was his greatest joy. He loved me without wanting anything back. He gave to me just because it made him happy to see me smile." She pressed both palms against her chest, over her heart, and then he died. And I forgot that kind of love even existed. I thought my father was a fairy tale. I thought gentlemen were something girls made up to survive the real ones." The fire crackled. Outside, wind moved through the pines like a whispered prayer. "But then you brushed my hair," Temperance said. "And you sang his song, and you gave me wildflowers and lemon drops and that blue ribbon without asking for a single thing. And tonight," her voice broke completely, "tonight you held my hand just because I asked you to, just to make me feel safe." Cade stood slowly, moved toward her with careful steps, like approaching a wounded animal. He stopped just in front of her chair, and even standing, he had to look up to meet her eyes. "Temperance," he said quietly, his voice rough as bark and warm as summer. "Your father wasn't a fairy tale. He was what men are supposed to be. Those others, they're the aberration. They're cowards who saw a woman alone and thought they could take whatever they wanted." He reached out slowly, telegraphing every movement, and took both her hands in his. "But I'm not them, and I need you to understand something." His grip tightened just slightly. "I didn't bring you here to use you, or to own you, or to take from you. I brought you here because I've been alone for 3 years, and your letters made me laugh for the first time since my Mary died. Because you were honest about who you were. I am not dainty, I am not small, and that honesty was the most beautiful thing I'd read in years." Tears tracked down Temperance's face, dripping onto their joined hands. "I want to give you what your father gave you," Cade said. "Not because I'm trying to replace him, nobody could, but because that's what love looks like. Real love. The kind that gives without counting the cost. The kind that makes someone feel safe enough to sleep without nightmares." He pulled her hands toward him, toward his chest, and pressed them over his heart. She could feel it beating strong, steady, real. "So let me," he whispered. "Let me brush your hair and sing to you and bring you wildflowers just because. Let me show you that your father wasn't the only good man who ever lived. He was just the first one who loved you right." Temperance couldn't speak, could only nod as 8 years of walls crumbled inside her chest. "Come on," Cade said gently, leading her toward the bedroom. "Let me do what your dad did. Every night. Until you believe again." The bedroom smelled of pine wood and lavender soap, the fire casting dancing shadows across the log walls. Temperance sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap, her whole body trembling like a leaf before a storm. She'd agreed to this, asked for this. But 8 years of survival had taught her that trust was just another word for foolish. Cade moved to the small chest in the corner and pulled out a brush, not fancy, just plain wood with boar bristles, worn smooth from use. He held it up so she could see it. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "She died when I was 15. But before that, every night, she'd brush my hair and sing to me. Even when I got too old to admit I needed it, she knew. She always knew." He pulled a chair close to the bed, positioning it so he'd be slightly behind her, giving her the power to move away if she needed to. "May I?" he asked. Such a simple question, but in it lived a universe of respect. Temperance nodded, not trusting her voice. She felt him gather her hair gently, the long brown strands that reached past her waist. His touch was so light, she barely felt it at first, like he was handling something precious that might break. The brush touched her scalp, and she flinched. Cade stopped immediately. "Did I hurt you?" "No," she whispered. I'm not used to gentle." She heard him take a slow breath. "Then we'll go slower." He started again, this time at the very ends of her hair, working through the small tangles with patient, careful strokes. No pulling, no impatience. Just steady, rhythmic brushing that reminded her of being 6 years old, sitting in her father's lap while he untangled the knots from a day of playing in the creek. "My dad used to hum while he did this," Temperance said softly. "Before he sang, just little tunes that didn't have names." Cade began to hum, low and rumbling. A melody that had no beginning or end, just a sound that filled the spaces between heartbeats. Temperance's eyes closed, against every instinct screaming at her to stay alert, to watch for the moment when kindness turned to demand. Her eyes closed. The brush moved higher, working through the middle length now, each stroke steady as breathing, each touch asking permission just by its gentleness. "You have beautiful hair," Cade said. "Like polished walnut." Temperance's breath caught. "My father used to say that." Those exact words. Then he had good eyes. The brush reached her scalp now, moving in long, soothing strokes from crown to ends. And something inside Temperance began to crack, not break, but crack the way ice cracks in spring when warmth finally reaches it. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Really? Why does it matter to you if I feel safe?" Cade's hands paused for just a moment. "You want the truth? Please." "Because I know what it's like to forget you're human," he said quietly. "After my Mary died, I worked myself half to death for 2 years. Barely spoke to anyone. Barely ate. I was just surviving. Going through motions." The brush resumed its rhythm. "Then one day, Mary Ellen Tucker from the next ranch over came by and found me passed out in the barn. I'd been sick for 3 days and hadn't even noticed." Temperance opened her eyes, listening. She stayed for a week. Cooked for me, made sure I ate, talked to me like I mattered. Not because she wanted anything, she's happily married with 4 kids. Just because she saw a human being who'd forgotten how to be human. His voice roughened. "She saved my life. Not from dying, from becoming something less than alive." The brush moved through Temperance's hair in long, hypnotic strokes. "So when I read your letters," Cade continued, And I saw a woman who was brave enough to cross half a country for a chance at something better. I recognized that feeling. That desperate hope that maybe somewhere, someone remembers how to be kind. And I thought maybe I can be for her what Mary Ellen was for me. Maybe I can remind her she's human, that she deserves gentleness. Temperance felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for once they didn't feel like grief. They felt like release. My dad used to say that taking care of people wasn't a burden, she whispered. He said it was a privilege, that loving someone well was the best thing a person could do with their life. He was right. Cade set down the brush and gently gathered her hair, smoothing it down her back. There, all the tangles are out. But he didn't move away, didn't stand up and leave like the job was done. Instead, his voice dropped to something soft and low, and he began to sing. From this valley, they say you are going. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. Temperance's breath shuddered in her chest. That song, that exact song, in that exact gentle lullaby rhythm her father used to use. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has brightened our pathways a while. Her father's voice echoed through her memory, overlapping with Cade's until she couldn't tell them apart. She was 16 again, lying in bed with fever, and her father was singing away her fear. She was 6 again, crying from a nightmare, and his voice was wrapping around her like a blanket. She was 10 again, missing her mother, and he was reminding her that she was loved, that she was safe, that tomorrow would be better. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu. The tears came harder now, 8 years of them, stored up behind walls she'd built to survive men who saw tears as weakness to exploit. But Cade kept singing. But remember the Red River Valley and the cowboy who loved you so true. When the song ended, Temperance turned in her seat to look at him. This man who barely reached her shoulder. This stranger who'd become her husband. This cowboy who was giving her back pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. My dad used to kiss my forehead when he was done, she whispered. And he'd say, you are my greatest joy. Cade finished softly. Temperance's eyes went wide. How did you? Because that's what you say to someone you love without conditions, he said simply. That's what they need to hear. He stood slowly, giving her time to object, and leaned forward. His lips brushed her forehead with a touch so gentle, it felt like a prayer. You are my greatest joy, Temperance Dalton, he whispered against her skin. And for the first time in 8 years, Temperance believed that someone meant it. Temperance didn't move as Cade stepped back. She sat frozen on the edge of the bed, his words echoing in her skull like church bells. You are my greatest joy. You are my greatest joy. You are my greatest joy. Words she'd thought she'd never hear again from a man who meant them. I don't understand, she finally whispered, her voice cracking. You've known me 4 days. 4 days, Cade. How can you possibly mean that? Cade moved to sit on the floor in front of her, deliberately placing himself lower, giving her the higher ground. Control. Always giving her control. You want to know what I see when I look at you? He asked. She nodded, afraid of the answer, but desperate to hear it. I see a woman who survived 8 years of men treating her like property, and she didn't let them break her. I see someone who could have given up, could have given in, could have let those bastards turn her hard and bitter, but she didn't. His eyes held hers, unflinching. I see a woman who kept hoping, who kept believing that somewhere, somehow, there was still goodness in the world. That takes a special kind of courage, Temperance. I'm not brave, she said, shaking her head. I'm just desperate. No, his voice was firm. Desperate people give up. Brave people keep going even when they want to give up. There's a difference. Temperance looked down at her hands, those big, mannish hands that her uncle's wife had always criticized, that men had always seen as proof she was built for work, not for loving. After my father died, she said quietly, I thought the world ended. My mother had been gone 6 months already, and then he got sick. Pneumonia. It took him in 3 weeks. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The last night, he could barely breathe, but he made me sit beside him, and he held my hand, these hands, and he said, Tem, listen to me. The world is full of people who will try to make you small, but you are not small. You are exactly the size God intended. And somewhere out there is a man who will love every inch of you without trying to diminish you. Tears dripped onto her lap. He died that night. And the next day, my uncle came for me, took me to Denver. And from that moment on, every man I met tried to make me smaller. Not my body, they couldn't do that. But my spirit, my hope, my belief that I deserved kindness. Cade's jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. The hotel manager, Mr. Pritchard, Temperance continued, the words flowing now like a river that had finally found a crack in the dam. He seemed nice at first, fatherly even. He'd pat my shoulder and tell me I was doing good work. But then one night he came to the linen closet where I was folding sheets. She closed her eyes, but the memory played anyway. He stood in the doorway, blocking my way out, and he said, "You're a big girl, Temperance, strong. You could do more than just clean rooms. I have guests who pay extra for special services. A girl like you could make good money, unless you think you're too good for it." And when I said no, when I told him I wouldn't, he cut my wages in half. Said if I wasn't willing to be helpful to the business, I was only worth half a worker. Cade made a sound low in his throat, almost a growl. I lasted 3 more months there, barely eating, barely surviving. Then I heard about the saloon needing servers. I thought it's just serving drinks. It's honest work. She laughed bitterly. But honest work doesn't exist for a woman alone. The owner, Mr. Garrett, he made it clear from day one. You serve drinks downstairs, but if you want real money, you go upstairs with the customers. That's where the smart girls work. Did he? Cade's voice was dangerous. No, I never went upstairs. Never. But saying no meant watching other girls eat while I went hungry. Meant sleeping in a room so cold I could see my breath. Meant enduring men grabbing at me every single night, assuming that because I worked in a saloon, I was available for purchase. Temperance opened her eyes and looked directly at Cade. There was a banker, Mr. Sheffield. He came in every Friday, always polite, always tipped well. After 6 months, he offered me a way out. He said, "Temperance, you're wasting yourself here. I could set you up in a little house. Make sure you're taken care of. All you'd have to do is be there when I visit, a few times a week. You'd be comfortable, safe." "And you said no?" Cade said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. I said no, because my father didn't raise me to be kept. He raised me to be loved. Her voice shook. "But after Mr. Sheffield, after watching him move on to another desperate girl who did say yes, I started to wonder if I was being stupid. If pride was worth starving for. If maybe my father's world didn't exist anymore." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "That's when I saw your advertisement. Widower seeks capable woman for partnership on Montana ranch. And I thought partnership, not ownership, not transaction. Partnership." She looked at Cade with raw vulnerability. "I thought maybe, just maybe, there was still one good man left. One man who remembered how to love the way my father loved." Cade reached up slowly and took both her hands in his. Those big, capable hands she'd been taught to hide. "Your father was right," he said fiercely. "You are exactly the size God intended, every inch of you. And those men, every single one of them, they're cowards. They saw your strength and your dignity and your refusal to be broken, and it terrified them because women like you remind men like them how small they really are." Temperance squeezed his hands, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. "My dad used to do this," she whispered. "When I was scared or sad or confused, he'd hold my hands just like this, and he'd tell me that as long as he was holding on, nothing could pull me under." "Then I'll hold on," Kate said simply. "Every day, every night, for as long as you need me to, until you remember how to float on your own. And even then I'll still be right here, just in case." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet, and for a moment they just stood there, this giant woman and this smaller man, both of them scarred by loss, both of them brave enough to try again. "Come lie down," Cade said softly. "You haven't slept through a full night since you got here. I can see it in your eyes." "I can't," Temperance admitted. "Every time I close my eyes, I wait for the door to open, for footsteps, for hands that take instead of give." Cade's face softened with understanding. "What if I stayed? Right here where you can see me. I'll sit in the chair and keep watch. I won't sleep, I'll just be here, making sure nothing bad comes through that door. My dad used to do that, Temperance said, her voice breaking. When I had nightmares as a little girl, he'd pull the chair up next to my bed and sit there all night, reading by lamplight, just so I'd know I was safe. Then that's what I'll do. Cade guided her to the bed, waited while she climbed under the quilts. Then he pulled the chair close, sat down, and picked up the small Bible from the bedside table. I'll be right here, all night, I promise. Temperance lay on her side, watching him in the lamplight, this man who kept giving her back pieces of her father's love. Cade? She whispered. Yeah? Thank you for being the man my father promised existed. Cade's eyes glistened. Sleep now, Temperance. You're safe. I've got you. And wrapped in his promise, watching him settle in to keep vigil through the night, Temperance finally let her eyes close. Temperance woke in the deepest part of night, that hour when the world holds its breath between darkness and dawn. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by. But she could see Cade, still sitting in the chair beside her bed, the Bible open in his lap, his head tilted back against the wall. He'd stayed all night, just like he promised. She watched him sleep for a long moment, this stranger who was teaching her that strangers could become family. His face was peaceful, younger in sleep, and she noticed for the first time the lines around his eyes, not from age, but from squinting into sun and wind. Working hands, honest hands. Her father had hands like that. The chair looked desperately uncomfortable. His neck was bent at an angle that would hurt come morning. Cade, she whispered. His eyes opened immediately, alert despite the hour. What's wrong? Are you all right? I'm fine, she said softly. But you can't sleep in that chair all night. You'll hurt yourself. He rubbed his neck, wincing slightly. I'm all right. I promised I'd stay. I know what you promised. Temperance sat up slowly, gathering her courage for what she was about to ask. But I want you to stay differently. Cade went very still. How do you mean? I want you to lie down here, on the bed, with me. The words came out in a rush. Not for what men usually want. Just to sleep. Just to be close. Because for 8 years I've slept alone, cold and afraid. And tonight I don't want to be alone anymore. She saw him hesitate, saw the careful consideration in his eyes. Temperance, I don't want you to feel like you have to. I don't feel like I have to, she interrupted. I feel like I want to. There's a difference. You taught me that difference. You showed me that want and obligation aren't the same thing. Cade studied her face in the dim light, looking for any sign of fear or false bravery. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him because he nodded slowly. All right, but I'm staying on top of the quilts, and I'm keeping my boots on. That way you know. I know, she said, a small smile touching her lips. You're staying on the outside of the boundaries, respecting them. My father would have done the same thing. Cade moved to the other side of the bed, settling carefully atop the quilts, keeping a respectful distance between them. For a long moment, they both lay there in the darkness, listening to each other breathe. Cade? Temperance whispered. Yeah? Would you hold my hand? She felt him shift, and then his warm, calloused hand found hers in the darkness. Their fingers intertwined, and something in Temperance's chest, something that had been clenched tight as a fist for 8 years, finally began to loosen. My dad used to hold my hand when I couldn't sleep, she said softly. He told me that as long as he was holding on, nothing bad could reach me, that his love was a wall around me, and I was safe inside it. Cade's grip tightened gently. Your father was a wise man. He was everything good, Temperance whispered. And when he died, I thought all the goodness in the world died with him, that I'd never feel safe again, never feel cherished again, never feel like someone's greatest joy again. Tears slid silently down her temples, pooling in her hair. Every night for 8 years I've gone to sleep afraid. Afraid of what tomorrow would demand from me. Afraid of what price I'd have to pay just to survive another day. Afraid that I'd eventually become so hard, so cold, that I wouldn't even recognize the girl my father raised me to be. She turned her head to look at Cade in the darkness. But tonight, I'm not afraid. Because you've shown me something I thought was lost forever. You've shown me that good men still exist, that my father wasn't a fairy tale or a fluke. He was just a man who understood what love actually means. Cade shifted closer, still on top of the quilts, still respecting every boundary, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What does it mean?" he asked quietly. "Love. What does it mean to you?" Temperance thought about it, about her father brushing her hair and singing lullabies and bringing her wildflowers, about Cade doing all those same things, expecting nothing, just giving because it made him happy to see her smile. "Love means giving without counting the cost," she said finally. "It means making someone feel safe enough to be vulnerable. It means seeing someone at their most broken and choosing to help them heal instead of taking advantage of their brokenness." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It means doing it to me like my dad did, every night, making me feel precious, just because I exist." "Then that's what I'll do," Cade said, his voice rough with emotion. "Every night, Temperance. I'll brush your hair and sing to you and hold your hand until you fall asleep. Not because you're paying me back with anything, not because I expect it to lead somewhere, but just because you deserve it, because that's what your father would want for you, and because—" He paused, and she heard him swallow hard. "Because in 4 days, you've reminded me what it feels like to have purpose again, to have someone to care for, to have a reason to come home that isn't just duty or routine. You've given me that gift, whether you know it or not." Temperance's heart cracked open completely. "Can you—" she started, then stopped, afraid to ask for more, even though everything in the past 4 days told her she could. "Can I what?" Cade prompted gently. "Can you hold me? Not just my hand. All of me. The way my father used to hold me when I was little and scared of thunder. Just hold me and make me believe I'm safe." She heard Cade's breath catch. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Cade moved carefully, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. He slid under the quilts this time, and then slowly, gently, asking permission with every inch he wrapped his arms around her. Temperance was so much bigger than him, her frame dwarfed his. But somehow, in his arms, she didn't feel big or awkward or wrong. She felt exactly right. She felt held, safe, home. She turned into his embrace, pressing her face against his chest, and let herself cry. Really cry. 8 years of tears she'd been too afraid to shed because crying made you vulnerable and vulnerable got you hurt. But Cade just held her tighter, one hand stroking her hair, the other firm against her back. "I've got you," he murmured. "You're safe now. I've got you." "My dad used to say that," she sobbed. "Those exact words. I've got you, Tem. You're safe." "Then he's speaking through me now," Cade said softly, "reminding you that you were loved then and you're loved now, and you'll be loved tomorrow, and every day after that." Temperance clung to him like a drowning woman clutching driftwood, and slowly, so slowly, the tears eased. The shaking stopped. Her breathing steadied. And in the quiet aftermath, wrapped in arms that held without taking, Temperance felt something shift deep inside her. The girl her father had raised, the one who believed in goodness and kindness and love. Without conditions, she was still there. Wounded, yes. Scarred, absolutely. But not dead, not gone. Just waiting for someone safe enough to come back out for. "Cade," she whispered. "Yeah?" "My dad used to kiss my forehead before I fell asleep, and he'd say, 'You are my greatest joy,'" Cade finished, and pressed his lips gently to her forehead. Temperance smiled against his chest. Really smiled, for the first time in 8 years. "Say it again," she whispered. "Please." Cade's arms tightened around her, and his voice was fierce with truth when he spoke. "You are my greatest joy, Temperance Dalton. Today, tomorrow, and every day I'm blessed enough to wake up beside you. You are my greatest joy." And believing him finally, fully believing him, Temperance let herself drift. She fell asleep in the arms of a man who reminded her of her father, a man who gave without taking, a man who saw her strength and her size and her scars, and called them beautiful. A man who understood that love wasn't about possession or transaction, but about making someone feel safe enough to be themselves. She fell asleep without fear for the first time since she was 16 years old. She fell asleep knowing that when morning came, he would still be there, still holding her, still keeping his promise. And when dawn painted the Montana sky with gold and rose, Cade was still holding her hand, still keeping vigil, still there. Because that's what good men do. They stay, they give, they love without counting the cost. Just like her father did. Every night. And just like Cade would do. For the rest of their lives. If this story touched your heart, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now in your part of the world. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss another story that might change your day or maybe even change how you see love. Because stories like this, they remind us that goodness still exists. That gentlemen are still out there. That the kind of love our fathers gave us, or the love we wished we had, it's still possible. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep believing together. God bless you, and thank you for watching.